It's literally heat on surfboards. Welcome to Groovy Movies. My name is Lily Austin.
Schwing, she's a babe, and my name's James Brailsford.
Very good, very good. Nice alluding to what's coming in this episode.
I've been saving my break from the format. I've been saving it for an occasion. I thought this is the time.
Because this is actually our final episode of the series, guys. Thank you for sticking with us through series 4.
It's been a bit of a change up for us trying to get this fortnightly release schedule going. So thank you for sticking with us. We've got some ideas when we come back, how we might change things up again.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. And actually, some of the films that we're talking about today perhaps may return in a later series. But we'll say no more about it. Yeah, we're still in production hell. Is that right? We're still in the production phase of the next series.
There we go.
But before we kick off with the main body of the episode, as it were, James, I know that you've been dying to talk to me about the recent Blake Lively controversy around her new film, It Ends With Us. But we're thinking maybe we should sidebar that particular controversy, latest cancellation, right?
Well, it's interesting how, even though I've got no interest, I say that we all love a bit of juicy gossip, but in general, just like nothing to do with the actual making of the film, like more just tittle-tattle into personal stuff, usually doesn't interest me. But it's interesting how I couldn't avoid it, because YouTube still recommends me videos to do with the issue and then the resolution of the issue. It seems that basically Blake Lively was a bit shitty to a journalist a few years ago, and I think now that same journalist has re-interviewed them, so I suspect the narrative arc is they're now besties or something. I don't know, but all I know is I can't avoid it even on my YouTube feed.
Yeah, it feels a bit Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, like a gristle for the gossip mill, but that on social media you just can't avoid. I keep seeing hot takes on Instagram when I honestly have not, I think, shown any interest. I'm not really aware of the film that this kind of all came out from, because, Blake Lively's in this new film, It Ends With Us. I never read that book. I know it's a big deal for fans of the book and people love it. It's weird because it's been so successful. But anyway, we are actually getting into the conversation, which we had made a very distinct decision not to discuss.
We've talked about how we're fed up. We're not getting into this. Instead, we're going to bring you the good stuff. What I'd like to start doing is start giving you the tasty morsels of news that I often send you, but that we don't talk about, and then they end up becoming a big news story, like bloody Barbenheimer. And it's all well and good us saying, hey, we were talking about it, we didn't put it on the pod. So I think this is decent enough to put on the pod. Might not mean much right now.
Okay, before we get into that, can I just say there is a link, I think, with Barbenheimer. You mentioned we discussed how it could have been, the story could have been, oh, it's interesting that It Ends With Us, Blake Lively's new movie, has toppled or is competing with Wolverine, Deadpool and Wolverine?
Deadpool and Wolverine.
Which is a film with her husband, Ryan Reynolds, and there was a big miss with them not releasing it on the same day. Could have been a fun Barbenheimer married couple fighting it out thing. It hasn't happened in years.
She does have a cameo in Deadpool and Wolverine, spoilers. But...
Yes, Mrs. Deadpool or something like this.
Mm-hmm. Lady Deadpool.
Lady Deadpool. Well, the thing that I clocked was apparently some of the criticism that she's received has been about the fact that the subject matter of this film is quite serious, and that she's been taking it quite lightly by making it about the fact that the main character works in a flower shop and she's wearing these floral dresses to all the press events. And I just thought, my God, Margot Robbie and Barbie made that a thing for the red carpet, that you dress to reflect. I mean, of course, people have done it for years, but Barbie really made it into, it's now every single film.
Now
you wear something. Yeah, it's a huge thing. And she's just following that trend. So it seems a little bit harsh to me. That's all I will say. That's my only take on the criticism, is that give the girl a break. She's just doing what everyone does on the red carpet. She doesn't even have a stylist. Like, well, how is she going to pick all these outfits? Just send me the florals.
I can't believe we've talked about a story we're not going to talk about for so long. Let's skim over the important news then.
Go on.
Well, I'm just kind of following with just because it's, I guess, loosely the industry I either work in or I'm interested in, is just like what's happening in Hollywood, what's happening to the provider of for decades what's been the kind of Western diet of film production. And so, long story short, it's kind of imploding because the studios chase streaming and they've all made lots of losses. So now they're hurriedly trying to cut costs, save money, tighten the belt, just get back to profitability, and they're way off. But Warner Brothers announced last week or the week before that they are investing nearly $9 billion in a Nevada-based Warner Brothers studio, which I think is a direct consequence of them losing lots of money in streaming and the new contracts that were created with the actors due to the strikes, increasing production costs. They're just looking to decrease their bottom line. So get out of Hollywood, where everything is expensive, move to a new state where they're not well known for making TV and film, but I guess they've got some kind of infrastructure there that they can grow. But the point is they're moving there for tax breaks and because the cost of living is cheaper.
Right. And when you told me about this, I thought that sounds great because, to be honest, I'd just been reading more about the investigation into Matthew Perry and his death and all these arrests. And the takeaway, if you know anything about that, seems to be that, my God, is Hollywood an incredibly toxic place. And the culture around celebrity is so bad. And okay, that's a bit extraneous, but my just feeling was like, when
Get out of Hollywood.
Yeah, when an industry is so concentrated in one place, I don't think that helps. And it's, you look at places. Was it in Wales that Game of Thrones was filmed?
It was in Ireland.
Okay, cool. Well, I know that the impact on the local economy was huge and amazing. So to my mind, that sounds like a good thing. But I know you have some reservations about this move.
My reservations are purely when it comes down to it as a consumer. Is the quality of what I'm going to pay money for in the future going to get better or worse? Getting out of Hollywood's no bad idea, but I don't think these moves are made for any kind of mental health well-being. I just think they're bottom line.
Sure.
My suspicion is that they may be doing a shift towards what they call non-union crews, because when we talk about these strikes happening in America, they're very much just for union crews. And just to make this very clear, there are union and non-union crews in America. The main thing is you can't have non-union crew on a union shoot, that they can't mix. So it's almost like there's a tiered system. To get into the union requires many more hoops and lots of sacrifices to get into, to get sponsored, to get nominated, to get access. Non-union, you don't have to go through that. So the idea is that a non-union, whether it's true or not, may not be as the same quality, but certainly they don't have as good pay and they don't have as good conditions as the union crew in California.
That's terrible if that is part of the reason they're moving, for sure.
They haven't said that, by the way. That's me reading between the lines. That's me kind of figuring out what's going on.
But this is news to me because I thought unions to support any person working in the industry, right? Don't you just pay? You just pay to be a member.
Unions are only negotiated for people within the union.
Yeah, no. But what I'm saying is, in order to join a union, I was under the impression that you need to prove that you are working. But this idea that you have to go through these hoops and you have to make sacrifice, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, again, if anybody's in the industry who can give us a clue, talk us through it, I would love to know. But my understanding is to get your union, like, I don't know, your permit or your pass, you have to have worked on a number of union shoots, not non-union shoots. So to get onto a non-union shoot when you're not a union member means you normally have to take internship roles, whereas you don't have to do that to get into a non-union crew.
Interesting. Well, it will be interesting to see. Look, I understand what you're saying, that it's concerning what is the cost to the production if you're doing this cost-cutting stuff. But I will say that if your money is able to go further, then actually you hopefully would have more money for things like good writers and so I don't think it's bad for the quality of a film if you filmed somewhere cheaper. Low budget movies are often the best movies. For the more money there is in a film, often the more control there is from the studio. Obviously this is Warner Brothers, so it doesn't automatically mean it's going to make bad quality films. But I hear what you're saying about, in general, the quality of crew and experience, and it doesn't bode well.
I just get the feeling that the Nevada studio will be we're going back to almost like the A pictures and the B pictures. You have your Hollywood studio where you make the expensive big ones. Then we're making this TV show and you've got to do it on the cheap, off to the Nevada studio, perhaps. And maybe that'll be a good incubator for new talent. You can't just up and shift an industry from one part of the country to the other. It looks good on a spreadsheet to know that you're going to save 25%. But the reality is, do people want to move their careers there? Are you going to get the talent to move there and all that kind of stuff? So
it will be interesting to see. But just, guys, keep an eye out for that. Let's see what Warner Brothers does over the next few years.
let's see how that all plays out.
Well, let's get into it then. So for this episode, we've got an interesting subject matter that was actually James's idea. So I'm going to let you introduce it. What are we talking about this week, James?
We are talking about films directed by women directors in the Hollywood system, and films that wouldn't classically be called "quote unquote" women's films. That they're films that you could imagine a male director would have directed. In my head, I categorize it as like they're getting to play with the boys' toys, and this is kind of what connects them together. And I've been looking to try, because we like to do films. When we do these things, we look at 3 films usually. So I just wanted to find 3 solid films that have definitely passed the test of time. They're still relevant and important films for different degrees now. And films that I think made money or did well. So I think by any metric, you can say these were successful films.
Totally, yeah. I love it. It's a very good subject. So this week we are talking about Wayne's World, American Psycho, and Point Break. Now, you probably know that Point Break was made by Kathryn Bigelow if you've heard of this film, but I think most people would probably be surprised to hear that American Psycho and Wayne's World were made by women. So
yeah.
So stick that in your pipe.
I got to say, I think this might be for me the most enjoyable 3 films we've watched. They're all in different ways very good films.
Yeah, totally, and all very different. So it was quite fun
trio
to watch. But yeah, I think that generally women aren't really allowed, are rarely given the opportunity to make these kinds of films. And so it was hard for us to find, because the point was you wanted it to be blockbuster films or super successful and films that are very well-known mainstream movies,
They've passed into the pop culture.
Exactly, because, there are so many great women directors who are lesser known and have made amazing films that perhaps are less recognizable. But I think most people have at least heard of all these films if they haven't watched them. So let's get into it. So we're starting off with the funnest one, I would argue, Wayne's World, which, can I just tell you, James, I love that you chose that, because actually this was one of my favorite films as a teenager. So me and my best friend at school, Amy, we watched this movie and became obsessed with it and loved it and quoted it, watched it many
I had no idea.
Yeah, we were like, we are Wayne and Garth, we are this duo.
It wasn't really part of my childhood. It was big when I was a kid, but it was a classic case of everyone loved it at school, so I didn't. I mean, it was as simplistic and as stupid as it always is. But yeah, so I think I might have watched it when it was like on at a house party, but I've never sat down and given it my full attention. So,
really?
I was more Bill and Ted than I was Wayne's World.
Right, which links us with Point Break, but we'll come back to Keanu Reeves later. So Wayne's World came out in 1992, and something I didn't actually know was that it was based on a SNL sketch, and they'd done a few of these movies based on sketches, and it was a big success with Blues Brothers, but most of the others haven't really worked. But Wayne's World was huge. It is the most successful film based on a sketch.
There was like Coneheads, I think, was another one.
Yeah.
And something like Two Nights at the Roxbury. I'm not sure. But yeah, there was a few films around that time where they tried to take a sketch and turn it into a film, but most of them just don't work, because the problem is, how do you expand into a 90 to 2 hour feature like a 5-minute weekly sketch? And I have to say, with Wayne's World, they nail it. They absolutely managed to take those characters, which, not really having watched SNL sketch, but you can tell from the film that it's them in their basement, like a cable TV free little access show. But they managed to make it the world around them. The characters come out of that bedroom and they still feel like the characters. They do things that they I don't know, they feel a little bit rounded. There's enough to sustain a film.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is that the story is about 2 friends, Wayne and Garth, who have a public access TV show. So it's sort of poking fun at this particular moment in American culture and history in the kind of late 80s, early 90s, when you could make your own TV from home. Sort of a precursor to what we have now. It's kind of wild.
This never really took off in England because of the way our TV landscape is. We don't have this kind of free-to-air public access where there's no budget for anything, and people are essentially encouraged to send them free content. So it's something that's very uniquely American, I think. But nowadays, if you were going to make this film again, it'd be 2 YouTubers, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I think the genius of it is sort of laughing at them for being a bit shit and people liking them for being shit. And I think, the way YouTubers and people on TikTok create content now.
They're a bit too slick.
It's too good. It's too good to work. But I think part of why it kind of expands so well into a full film is because a lot of it is making fun of it's like a mockumentary where Mike Myers' character Wayne is kind of talking to the camera as his Garth, and they're kind of poking that light of all of that.
They're aware that they're in a film, and I have to say I do love the fourth wall breaks. Wayne and Garth both do the fourth wall breaks differently. With Garth, he's much more nervous and more of an introvert. He's much shyer. There'll be moments where you realise he's trying to get your attention as the viewer, whereas Wayne's much more confident. He will directly address the camera. So even those moments of like breaking the fourth wall, they're all done very imaginatively. There's a little bit of a spin on them.
Yeah. But let's talk about the director. Let's talk about Penelope Spheeris. So
absolutely.
So she got her start in rock documentaries.
Yeah, she was tapped to direct the Spinal Tap movie, but she turned it down. Basically, she's got this rock documentary background, which means she spent time with real-life rockers, rock fans. But, she was immersed in this world.
Yeah, and that was why they chose, because that's the other aspect of Wayne and Garth's characters, is that they're heavy metal fans, they're musicians themselves, and really part of this whole world. This is a kind of a mockumentary. This is a documentary about these two music-obsessed TV makers. So we want a director who understands the reality of that in order to poke fun of it. It's quite clever.
It is quite clever because it means their world is treated with respect. We see the world as they see it. They're really into this rock music and this lifestyle. And I think that is part of what Penelope Spheeris brings to the role as a director. There's an element of, yes, we're having a laugh, but we're respecting their world.
Yeah. It's really good.
And just reading about Penelope Spheeris' background, I mean, her mother and her father both worked in the carnival. The father was almost like the master of ceremonies, and the mother worked in the box office. So she spent her early years traveling around America as part of a carnival. I think her dad was killed in some dispute, so she lost her father at a young age. So a very, very unconventional background as a director. She was raised by a mother, basically, with her and a sibling, so she did not have much money. She worked as a waitress while she put herself through film school. So she's self-funded her directorial career.
I've read in interviews her talk about what a struggle it was up until this point. She was pushing through, but it was really tough going for her until she got Wayne's World. And then after that, really, and that was, I think she was like around 46 at that point. And that really kind of catapulted her career. But I think we have to talk about the fact that she wasn't asked to make Wayne's World 2, despite the fact that Wayne's World was a huge success, which apparently was down to the fact that Mike Myers didn't like her final cut of Wayne's World and so blocked her working on the second film, because they already had started working on it before they finished the first one. Test screenings had been really successful. Mike Myers wasn't there for the test screenings. His father sadly died at that point, so he had to leave for his funeral. Didn't see the test screenings, had loads of notes, loads of changes. Penelope Spheeris pushed back on that and said, no, we've got to keep it as it is. It's done really well. So he blocked her doing the second film. And second film is really not as good as the first.
Classic sequelitis.
Yeah, I've seen it. And it's fun. It's got all the same elements, but it just doesn't have that sparkle.
Yeah, the magic.
And it's just not as smart, I do think... Obviously, Mike Myers is a very talented comedian and super intelligent, but I think actually their combination really made that first film work so well. It was so tight, it was so funny, and I think it was a huge loss to that second film. It could have really done with her.
Yeah, I was reading that. I mean, in general, he's a difficult man to work with, seems to be the gist of work with Mike Myers, and yeah, he didn't help her out or her career at all.
Yeah, and I think... Okay, big stars who have sway, and obviously he was the writer as well and the creator of Wayne and Garth, so of course he would have sway, but I do think that often with male directors, other people support them more at the studio, So if someone's trying to get them pushed out, they often get more backing, whereas so often it's the case that women directors are just dropped completely in.
He could have been supportive for sure. He would not have been unaware of how unusual it was to have a woman director helming these projects. So it's a shame that he didn't use that in any way, because the film is good. The film is clearly well directed. Whatever issues they had with each other, it was personality clash. There was no quality issue, I don't think.
I think it's a perfect, funny film. It just
Yeah.
zips along. You know, I've watched this movie, I don't know how many times. So, and rewatching it again, I was completely engaged. You know, I never looked at my phone, which these days tells you a lot.
I loved Wayne's World. I had a hoot. I was saving it for like an evening. You know, I wanted it to be a nighttime viewing because that's the time you went to watch it. My feeling is that each of these three films is almost like an excellent example of this kind of genre. So this is an excellent example of like a goofy, stupid comedy, because I've seen terrible examples of this. As much as it's silly and goofy, it's really well done. All the choices are like the best choices you could make. And I noticed that with all three of these films.
It's very difficult to parse out who contributed to what in terms of the tone of the film. But what I really like about it is that it's a very intelligent comedy, but it's very kind and soft. A lot of the jokes are about the fact that both Wayne and Garth are pretty kind of beta men who are very soft and cute about the women that they fancy. You know, okay, there's this like schwing thing, but it's it's pretty it's so ridiculous and silly, and they're like, oh my gosh, she's amazing. Oh, you know, they're very, very cute. There isn't this feeling of leeriness about their attraction to the women in the film. The women are, well, Garth's love interest is perhaps not fully three-dimensional, but Cassandra, played by Tia Carrere, she is a very well, fully formed character, a much stronger character than Wayne's character in many ways. What I think is quite nice is that, you know, they date and it's quite easy them getting together, but there isn't a sex scene. There's only one kiss briefly at the end. I like that side of things.
There's the gratuitous sex scene where it comes up with the title gratuitous
but they literally,
sex scene.
You know, they're not even kissing in it. You know, they're just sort of weirdly like that. It makes light of everything, but without this like harsh misogynistic edge, which to be honest, a lot of comedy does have. And I do wonder if a male director had made that film, if it had been different. He might have pushed it a bit more. So I really appreciate that in the direction, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking that when I was watching the film, actually, especially with Garth, because I've maybe only seen this film once. I only know the very basic outline of what they're like as characters, and I hadn't appreciated that Garth's very clearly much more of an introverted character. He's much more of a quote-unquote like technical nerd. He's like into building things, and I like the fact that you said that they're very kind to him. It's not cruelly done. I can't quite put my finger on it, but we're not really laughing at him so much. The fact that he's a nerd, he happens to be that kind of character, and he's treated with a bit more kindness, kind of non-judgmental, really.
I think that's partly why these films endure. You end feeling good about it, and you're feeling warm about in your reaction to everyone in the film because you like them. And I think actually this does link with Point Break, because similarly with Point Break, which we're going to speak about, there is a definite kind of softness to how Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze's characters react to each other, right? It's more than just a bromance. There is something in their dynamic, like a little bit more. Do you know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying. I mean, with Point Break, it's much more clear that it's homoerotic subtext. But when I was watching this film, I was thinking, this is the closest that subtext is to text.
But I wonder if someone else had done the treatment on this film, if that would have been so at the fore. And I think that is partly why Point Break it has endured so well. The weird complexity to the film, even though so much of the film is kind of simple and almost a little bit stupid. But we'll get on to that in a moment. Okay, so before we get to Point Break, because we have a lot of thoughts on that, we're going to save it to the last, like it's pudding. American Psycho, James. This was my contribution to it. Had you seen it before?
I've seen it once before, and it was quite a few years after it come out. It was a stupid thing where, this is so stupid. I was like, it's a psycho killer film. I'm not interested, blah, blah, blah. Of course, it's not that at all, but it is that. It's a much more interesting film than if you just think it's a film about a serial killer and that's it, you kind of missing the point. So that was why it didn't come up on my radar. Then I watched it and realised how great it is. But it's one that I haven't watched since, so I was really looking forward to rewatching it. And again, a film that's aged incredibly well, that's got a lot to say. It's very violent, but only in incredibly short bursts, and the violence has a point, which is if you're going to put violence in, make it effective, as in it's violent, but also make it have a point in the story.
This is my kind of horror film, if you can even call it that.
To me, this is like a character study, an absolute, one of the best anti-heroes or antagonists, one of the best absolutely unlikable characters that you are forced to watch a film with. There's no There's no getting away from him. They are the main character of the film.
Totally, totally. So it came out in 2000, which with all these films that we're talking about, the other two came out
Early 90s.
91, 92, and 2000. But I'm sort of counting 2000 in the same decade, to be
Yeah,
honest.
when it was made in the 90s and it was developed throughout the 90s.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's still, I do think 2000, pre 9/11, I think of that time period as the same before, when we, interesting time, I think, for film. I mean, we've talked about the 90s, an amazing time for film. Interesting things were being made on a big budget.
This was kind of like classic indie style American budget, wasn't it? So it's under $10 million, made $35 million. Everybody's happy there. The evolution of the project as well, it was considered an unfilmable book and it got passed around a bit. Mary Hannon, the director, got involved quite early on and then included a writer, Guinevere Turner, to kind of work on the script. But then the producers wanted Brad Pitt or something ridiculous. Mary Hannon was like, no, I'm not doing this. I want.
No, it was Leonardo DiCaprio, I think.
Or sorry. No, you're
coming
quite
off
right,
the
it was.
coming off the back of Titanic.
That's right. And so they wanted Leo, the man of the moment. Mary Hannon absolutely did not want to stick with Christian Bale. So she left the project. Oliver Stone came on board to direct it now, ditched the script that they've been working on. This all didn't work out because those are not good reasons to get somebody on board your project. Mary Hannon came back and they still didn't want Christian Bale, but she knew that they'd asked her back so that eventually she'd be able to win them round. Watching Christian Bale in that film, you can see that Christopher Nolan was like, yep, he looks good in a suit. He can be my Batman. But he's born for the role of American Psycho.
Absolutely is. But he, at that point, wasn't that well known. So the studio was looking for a bigger name. Because the thing is that American Psycho, the book by Bret Easton Ellis, had come out in the 80s. And it was a hugely well-known book because it was incredibly controversial. Feminist groups and scholars really took against it. It's a very, very unfeminist book. And it's interesting because Bret Easton Ellis has said that no, it was a feminist book. The point of it, I was trying to write a feminist book. And I haven't read the book, but for what I'm here, it's, again, the violence is very graphically described. And I do think
that's what I've heard as well.
Yeah, and I do think that books get into your bones more than film. I don't know why, but there's some way you can kind of tune out of something you're seeing, but when you're reading words...
And the words are in your head, yeah.
Exactly. So I can imagine that he may have, I won't want to say failed, but maybe didn't quite succeed in what the film absolutely, I think, does succeed in. Like, to me, this is an incredibly feminist film. And it was smart of them. Okay, it was a battle for Mary Harron to get it, but only really a woman could have made this film. Well, made the film that we have. That it makes sense for her to have made this film because you need, I think, that distance from the subject. Because really, I mean, again, I haven't read the book, but what this film is about is male vanity and what it is to be a man in kind of late 80s, late capitalism. It's so much of it is about this culture and this world that he is a part of as a guy working in finance. And in that world, how women are completely sidelined and disposable. And I do think it really helps that a very smart and very feminist filmmaker. I mean, she directed I Shot Andy Warhol before that. So,
which I remember that coming out at the time. I Shot Andy Warhol, and I thought it's a great film, excellent debut feature film. But it is a takedown exactly of that time and of toxic masculinity. But it is also just the satire. It works so well because I think right now I've just happened to be going through a true crime hyperfixation. So I'm reading lots of stuff about psychopaths. And
again,
I mean, again, what can I say?
You and Mary have a lot in common because apparently she was always very preoccupied with psychopaths.
because what you're seeing on screen is just the textbook psychopath, the unadorned psychopath, and what I think the film really highlights is that he doesn't even have to hide. He's there in clubs telling the barmaid he wants to, kill them, rip their skin from their bones or something. He'll mention it in passing, but nobody's listening. And in fact, the whole point of the film is he literally cannot even get people to arrest him. And it only just clicked, this whole thing about the murder of Paul Allen. There's a character amazingly played by Jared Leto, who I understand was originally in the running to play Patrick Bateman. So perfect casting is essentially this Patrick Bateman clone. But the whole thing, I'd never noticed in the film that Paul Allen is mistaking Patrick Bateman for somebody else. And I didn't realise in the film that Patrick Bateman has mistaken this guy played by Jared Leto for Paul Allen. It's not Paul Allen. I don't think anybody in the film knows who Paul Allen is. I think the whole joke is because somebody says to him, I had dinner with Paul Allen in Spain last week. Everybody thinks somebody else is Paul Allen. So whoever Jared Leto is, he was just some guy. And that clicked, it made me realize the facelessness of it all. But the fact that an unadorned sociopath can run around in this environment and essentially he can't even turn himself in.
I watched an interview with Mary Harron where she talked about how she felt like she'd slightly failed with the ending because a lot of people interpret the ending as basically it was all a dream and he wasn't really doing these things. And that was definitely not the point she was, but I thought that maybe was what they were trying to do. I definitely get that impression from it, but it's not totally clear. It is a bit ambiguous.
No, it's ambiguous.
But but at certain points it does seem that way because he really, really cracks up at the very end. And I thought that was quite interesting because, no, it wasn't meant to be that. He absolutely did do the violent things that you see. It's just ambiguous about what exactly is going on in his world, but she didn't want it to seem like it was all a dream and he's not the psychopath that we see him to be in that film. And similarly, part of the reason Mary Harron really wanted Christian Bale for the role, besides the fact that he's an incredibly talented actor, and I have to say I find him a little bit irritating in general, but watching him in this, I'm like, God, no, he is he is probably the best actor out there. He is amazing. Part of the reason she really liked him was they had the same dark, sick sense of humor, but also he did not like Patrick Bateman. He thought he was a sick man and there was nothing redeemable about him. Whereas a lot of the other actors that Mary Harron auditioned quite liked Patrick Bateman, or at least thought he was cool. I thought that was very interesting. And I got that impression in the same interview with Short about the Fair. Christian Bale's also being interviewed and he was asked, what did you like in him? What did you relate to in him? And he was like, absolutely nothing. He was very interested in playing someone who was just a complete monster. And that was why he didn't want any backstory. He didn't want any context to this guy. He just, he's just a monster acting in this very fucked up world that, like you say, you can just live in if you've got money and no one will stop you doing what you want to do.
I read an article where she was talking about the same thing. There's this idea that there needs to be backstory to motivate a sociopath. And as she says in this article, the words to the effect of, there doesn't need to be one. There's many sociopaths who don't have any backstory that you might say, aha, that's why they did it. It's not important. And I think that choice that Christian Bale does where, he doesn't see Patrick Bateman as a hero. He despises him, which I think allows him to really play him as a despicable character. Within minutes, you don't like him. I love the fact that the first kind of group chat we have where he's with his guys mates, he's the guy saying, hey, leave off the anti-Semitism. He's saying the liberal things that a good guy might say. But then he goes to the bar and tells the barmaid he's going to fucking murder her. And that's brutal. It's unforgiving. There's no anything to take the edge off. It's horrific.
That tone of voice he uses where he says that line about cool it with the anti-Semitism is the same tone in which he talks about how, we've got to help this planet and cure poverty. And, again, he always has this, whenever he's saying anything that the words are correct, he says it in this weird delivery, this like robotic almost, hi, I'm a guy on the TV selling you something. Yeah, he's completely cold underneath. And the only time you ever see him feel anything is when he's been given someone's card and it's better than his and he's literally breaking out in the sweat and like devastated. This is the level, this is where his mind is.
With most on-film serial killers, they'll usually have some patter or some rehearsed lines or some ritualistic behavior before the kill. And I love that with Patrick Bateman, it's discussing the most vacuous pop, be it Whitney Houston, Huey Lewis and the News. His pre-kill ritual is to discuss the merits of some really empty American pop. And just sums him up. Here we have a very mundane, no real insights, just very surface level discussion of pop music.
And it's always the wrong thing, right? Who thinks that Genesis was better after Phil Collins moved to the front of the stage?
Oh yeah, I forgot that.
It's iconic, totally.
He's totally buying into the 80s, isn't he, I guess?
Because he is completely surface, and this is a kind of 80s, this very moneyed, 80s where surface is everything. You know, his girlfriend is
Yeah.
just the same, who he disposes. You know, she doesn't care who he is as a person. She doesn't know him. She just likes having an attractive, wealthy fiance. It's all surface in their world.
Yeah.
It's so perfect. And even in our kind of setup of this, of course, there's a certain implication, I guess, about what a woman versus a man can bring to a film. And of course, I mean, that's such a limited idea, you know, people are people. But I just really love that Mary Harron just really, I think, got the source material and got how to make it into a really, really successful film. And apparently Bret Easton Ellis in recent years has been quite critical of American Psycho. Even though at the time he loved it, he was really pleased with it. It was one of the first adaptations of his books that he actually liked. But in recent years, he's being a bit critical. And I do wonder if it's because the film succeeded where he failed, you know, what I said before about him wanting it to make this feminist story, and maybe it doesn't work quite so well in the book form. But the film, I do think, works perfectly. And even like you said with the violence, yes, it is violent, but it's sort of like with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is actually referenced in the film. He's watching it in one particular scene while he's doing his workout. You almost see it, but you don't ever actually see the violence. It always cuts just at that moment, and it's very contained. It does what it needs to do to tell the story, but it isn't, I don't think it's gratuitous.
It doesn't wallow
ever.
in it. It has the intended effect, I think, that the movie violence is meant to have, which is meant to shock, it's meant to hit you, but you know, there's a reason for being shown as much as you need, and then it finishes.
Okay, right. Shall we move on to Point Break?
Yes, our Oscar-winning director. I didn't realize until researching this, Kathryn Bigelow was the first woman to be awarded the Oscar for Best Director. Didn't realize she was the first.
And that was for Zero Dark 30. I believe that she had been married to James Cameron.
89 to 91.
Thank you. And that year he was nominated for Best Director for Avatar, and she beat him, which I
Tee-hee.
I mean, hopefully they had a, you know, amicable breakup and they were happy for each other. But still, I appreciated that.
I think they do, actually. Only just from bits I've been reading, researching this, but the only film I think I've seen of Kathryn Bigelow's before watching Point Break was Strange Days, a science fiction thriller from 1995. And that was an idea that James Cameron presented or gave to Kathryn Bigelow as saying, hey, would you like to make this? So
okay.
I imagine there must be some level of amicability. You wouldn't make your ex-husband's idea for a film 6 years after or 5 years after you divorced.
Yeah, that's a good point. Oh, well, I love that for them. Good for you guys.
And also, watching Point Break, I mean, I haven't seen it before because, again, back in the day, it was like a cheesy action film, I would have labelled it, so not interested. Then I realised it was Kathryn Bigelow, and I just thought, yeah, one day I'll watch it. Well, you know, now is that one day. I'm glad I saved it for you because I was watching it thinking you could have told me this was directed by James Cameron, by one of the kind of bigger male directors of that period, and you wouldn't even hesitate to agree. This is a director who loves directing these big, muscular Hollywood films with action scenes, with car chases, with foot chases, with over-the-top characters spouting ridiculous dialogue. All of it lands. This is somebody who's gleefully playing with all the toys of making a big American film.
The thing with Point Break, right, when it opens, you're kind of slapped in the face with all the tropes of big box office boys movies. You have a young upstart who's very, very good, but he's been given a tough time at police training because he's training to be in the FBI, and then he gets into a kind of buddy dynamic with the older, cynical FBI guy who doesn't give a fuck anymore, but he cares, and he wants to make a name for himself, and there's just a lot initially that seems so tropey. It's a bit intense, but actually it's very, first of all, it's very watchable. So like it hits you. It's a lot, but it's you can't deny it's entertaining to watch. But actually, as the film goes on, you see that there's this like weird combination where it is, big budget, and this plot is kind of ridiculous and stupid. I mean, we're talking about...
It's like the highest of high concepts in a movie, really.
Yeah, so we're talking about Keanu Reeves' character investigating a group of surfers who do bank robberies with these dead presidents' rubber masks on their face and suits. So very good look. I mean, super clever. That apparently was James Cameron's idea, by the way, the dead presidents. Great great working partnership, them two, before and after divorce. And yeah, it's just about him kind of infiltrating that gang and then trying to take them down. And that even as a concept, you've got this like dual narrative of these surfers who are at one with the wave, and that's the thing. That's what's interesting is
there's lots of talk about the philosophy and the mindset of a surfer.
But that's the thing that I find interesting. On the one hand, you've got the kind of big, dumb, over-the-top, high-concept film, and then also running alongside it is this interesting philosophical musing that both Patrick Swayze, the leader of this gang, and Keanu Reeves' characters are very infatuated with. And that's where you get into the kind of the homoerotic element, is that they both, on the mental level, they really, really connect. They're both looking for this. They're trying to catch these. I don't really get the philosophy fully, but they want to be free, right? They want to be free.
It's very much COD philosophy, isn't it? It's all like about freedom, man, and against it. It's just like just buzzwords. I don't quite follow it either. I was hoping maybe you would, but I was like, I don't quite get it. But it sounds very surfer duty, though, doesn't it? Like a lot of hot air, really.
A little bit, yeah. But I do think there's something. The way it's done is very smart, and like whether or not you really buy into what they like. I think as a viewer, you are a bit cynical about what it is that they buy into, but I believe that they believe it. Do you know what I mean? And it's done in a smart way. Like it all zips along. You're like, I'm there. I'm with it. It's impressive.
The whole film zips along. Again, this is a really well-made, high-concept action film. It's one of the very best from this like late 80s, early 90s period. Like no contest. The opening sequence where Keanu Reeves goes into the police agency's officers, and he's been introduced by the kind of the captain who doesn't like this young upstart, and it could have been out of Michael Mann's Heat. It's like a one continuous take, and we see everything. The camera zips around. It's like the choreography is immaculate. It's
a lot of it is like Heat. It is that dynamic as well between Patrick
like the bank
Swayze
robberies as well.
Keanu. Yes,
yeah, the two antagonists. I hadn't even why I hadn't even thought that, but yeah, and even the way that the bank heists. I mean, they're very kinetic. They're beautifully directed action sequences. Again, you can't fault it.
Yeah, it's actually so like Heat. It's literally Heat on surfboards.
That is the pitch. God damn it. and it's a few years earlier than Heat. Oh my God. It's like 4 years before Heat.
No, is it? Oh my God.
Let me just check. I'm sure.
Yeah, 95, isn't it?
95, yeah, and this is 91. There we go. I think somebody got some inspiration.
God, Kathryn Bigelow isn't given enough props. I know in a way she is because she's kind of the only really well-known big blockbuster woman director.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, God, yeah. I was thinking it came after Heat. Oh my God.
So did I when watching it. I just thought, oh, she's taking a few cues out of Heat. And then, no, as we're talking about it, absolutely.
Amazing. Yeah. But what I was going to say was I think there's something about, I don't quite know, because as we're talking about it, the surfer philosophy does sound a little bit ridiculous. But I do think something about that gives it a bit more weight. It's not like more so than something like Top Gun or something. I know that that's also a big hit, but it makes it have a bit more substance. You get more on board with the ridiculousness because, I mean, there are points where they're jumping out, they're skydiving. Like the set pieces in this film are completely absurd.
If you like action films, this has got some of the best action, full stop.
I'm just looking at my notes and one of the things I wrote down was a quote, "You've got to go down, Bodhi." This is what I mean. That was right at the end of the film. Some of the dialogue is course, it's
I love it.
It's blockbuster as fuck.
There's all these quips going around, like, which I can't even remember them. I just remember thinking these are great quips. Everything just solidly done. It just suffuses the film with a bit of an extra. What the hell is going on here? But I might not be able to express it clearly, but there's just something a bit extra that adds to the film all the way through it.
Because I think there's a contradiction there, right? Between you think of a surfer, you think of the surfer lifestyle. The idea is you're at one with nature. It's kind of thrill-seeking. It's perhaps a little nihilistic. You don't really, life is very much just about getting that thrill, being in the water. And generally the vibe is that this community doesn't doesn't need for much, doesn't want a lot. So the idea that they are also bank robbers, when, very materialistic, but okay, there's a connection there because both things are thrill seeking. And also both are quite nihilistic because if you want to make money, bank robbing, it's a short-term plan, and a very high stakes. It's not the smart man's strategy.
From watching Heat and Point Break, we've learned a few things about bank robbing.
On balance, I'm not sure I'm going to take it up as a late life career. But you never know. Who knows? I was trying to find where this concept came from, where this idea, because I think it was an original script that was kind of doing the rounds in Hollywood, Point Break, with a different, I think it had a terrible name. Like,
it was going to be called Johnny Utah when Keanu Reeves joined the cast.
Yes. Rubbish, because that's Keanu Reeves' character's name, but rubbish tells you nothing. And then they changed it to Riders on the Storm, like the Doors song, which I think is actually kind of good, but it's nothing on Point Break. Point Break is perfect. Point Break's perfect.
Riders on the Storm doesn't sound action enough, does it?
And it also, again, like it's a bit, there's not that much of a connection to the Doors. There is a bit of the Doors vibe, I have to say, to their apartment, like the surfers flat, but I mean, whatever.
With all the candles that have been lit. Who lit those candles?
I had the exact same thought. Why are there candles lit unsupervised? It looks so dangerous in there.
Because that's the kind of risk takers they are, Lily.
That's it. They're thrill seekers. We like candles. We get in the water. But I think, so basically, this script was around, but then Kathryn Bigelow, with the help of James Cameron, her husband at the time, they rewrote the script and got it to what it became. And I think figuring out how you connect these two things, how you resolve that contradiction. And actually, it's not really resolved as such, but it's an interesting thing that these guys are so nihilistic. They don't give so few fucks about society that they're happy to just, risk hurting other people and themselves to get money in order to keep going with their lifestyle, with their thrill-seeking life. And ultimately, Bodhi is so nihilistic that he doesn't even care about his own life. I will say no more about that because I don't want to spoil it for you guys in case you haven't seen it. But I think it's interesting that is the heart of the film. It gives it so much weight.
It makes it stand out a little bit from its contemporaries. This isn't directly related to Point Break, but it was just more about James Cameron and Kathryn Bigelow's working collaboration. When they were working on Strange Days, which was James Cameron's ideas, Kathryn Bigelow made it into a feature in 1995. They split the tasks between them when they were developing the idea, and it was James Cameron who concentrated on the central romance of the film and Kathryn Bigelow who developed the action sequences, which, is a slight inversion of where you might imagine each task might be assigned.
And that is clearly Kathryn Bigelow's talent. She's so good at action sequences. Even just that chase scene when Keanu Reeves' character is like running. Yeah, exactly.
Foot chases are notoriously hard to do because you can't run that fast, right? Cars, you can swing around corners, but to get a foot chase like you got on cinema, there's not that many. I'd say this is right up there with Baby Driver by Edgar Wright.
And to be honest, I find a lot of foot chases quite boring after a while. I'm like, just get where you want to go.
You've really got to work hard directing them to make them feel exciting.
Yeah, but it was interesting when doing my research about this film, I saw quite a few articles talking about how this is the female gaze on toxic masculinity, or this brings a feminine perspective. And I have to say, I don't agree with that at all. I feel like this film is male gazy. This film is very much in keeping with every other action movie. There's a bit of gratuitous nudity of random sexy women, and like there isn't. I don't think this film is like feminist in that sense.
I think it's the male gaze done well.
Yes.
It's as classy as the male gaze can do. I think it's Kathryn Bigelow going, okay, I'll give the boys what they want, but I'm doing it.
I'm not saying that so much as a criticism. It's more of an observation about what we imbue women directors with, even when that's not really what they're doing. Like, I don't think that's what she's after. She wanted to make an exciting, thrilling action movie.
She wanted to make money that made bank, baby.
Exactly. She wasn't looking to do away with all of these classic elements of the genre, but she does them in a very good way, but mixes in this interesting additional element, like we talked about the philosophy of the whole thing and these contradictions. So she takes it to another level. But you're right, no, it doesn't. The action is always the center of it.
It's an action film. It's a high concept action film, and it never forgets that's what it is.
All right, well, to conclude, as I mentioned at the top of the show, this is our final episode of the season. Don't worry, we will be back. We will be back. TBC when exactly, but we thought we would finish off by leaving with you a few recommendations for the autumn, because there are lots of exciting films coming out that we're not going to be talking about, unfortunately. Well, maybe we will. Maybe we'll come back to them. But anyway, James, why don't you start us off? What are you excited about that's coming out in the next couple of months?
Well, I have to be honest with you. It was pretty slim pickings when I was looking what's coming up. These are just the ones that I could find that I think I'm definitely going to be watching. So the first one is Joker Folie à Deux, the madness of two, as it turns out, which is a French term for kind of a particular kind of sociopathy.
Okay.
Anyway, the Joker sequel. I'm interested in seeing it because I liked the first one, didn't love it, liked the first one. The fact that this is a sequel with Lady Gaga as co-lead, very interesting. And the final thing that I was like, okay, now I'm a bit excited. I went to see another film at the IMAX, and the trailer came on, and it had sequences in the full height IMAX format. And I was like, oh shit, they've shot this specifically for IMAX, like Dune Part 1 and 2. So my question to you, Lily, is where's the only screen in London you could see it in this 1.43 full IMAX? Don't rush into this. It's 1.43, which is the square like Oppenheimer. It fills the entire square frame.
Well, I was going to say BFI, but is that wrong?
It is, yeah, because the BFI has only got a 1.9 IMAX. It doesn't go. It goes more widescreen than it goes high. So the only theatre in London that has the square
Have
IMAX
I been to it?
I don't think you have.
Oh.
It's the Science Museum.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say that next. Actually, I have been to the Science Museum IMAX. When I was a child, I watched something about dinosaurs.
Oh, I take it all back. I do apologise. But yeah, so that's my top ticket for Joker Part 2, the Science Museum, which is not great seating. I've got to be honest, I'm not going to push this one that hard. The seating is a hard sell in the Science Museum.
Yeah, very hard.
But
very hard.
Second recommendation, skip the 1.43 sequences, go straight to Dolby Theatre because the music will sound phenomenal in Dolby Theatre.
But just be careful about your choice of Dolby Theatre, because some of them are absolutely huge. And you'll end up being really, really far away from the screen, like I was when I saw Dune Part 2 for the second time. I was not pleased.
That's only one Dolby Theatre in the entire world, I'd say. That's the only one that's out of spec. So, yeah Leicester Square Dolby Theatre, no. And my other film is The Substance, which is, I keep seeing advertisements for that on my Mubi. It seems to be some kind of body horror about some serum that makes you younger, starring Demi Moore.
I love Demi Moore. She's so cool. Okay, I want to be served that stuff. Why am I getting all this bollocks about Blake Lively? I want to see what's coming out on Mubi. Okay, good.
You don't want to see what's on my recommended list, Lily. I'm selective in what I'm telling you comes up there.
Okay, so for me, I'm very intrigued to see the new Beetlejuice movie, Beetlejuice. I'm not sure. The site says, not sure about it, but I do think it's quite cool. I've seen that there's been this guerrilla marketing around London. I was on the tube the other day, and there was this poster that looked like it was a flyer from the 80s that said Beetlejuice. I think it was like very reminiscent of the first film, and that was all it said on it. It kind of had this illustration, and I just thought that's quite cool. They've been quite thoughtful about the way they're doing this reboot. I know it's like yet another,
reboot,
IP
sequel,
reboot
prequel,
thing, but I am kind of intrigued, especially because Michael Keaton and Winona Ryder are reprising their roles. And
Tim Burton's back directing, so it's got the best chance of it not being disappointing. But I've never seen the first one, so my feeling is just where we are right now with the industry. I don't have great hopes.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure, but I'm going to go see it, and I'll be intrigued to see. The other thing that's coming out in September that I'm quite interested to see is called In Camera. And this is a debut film by a director called Nakash Khalid. And it sounds really cool. It's like a satire about the casting business and kind of looks at that, and also the treatment of actors of color. It's meant to be really, really brutal, but kind of quite smartly done. So I really want to see that. And then the other film that I have to say I'm excited to see is
Paddington.
No, whatever. Gladiator 2.
Just a wild guess.
Gladiator 2 in November. Yeah.
No, absolutely no. What are you on? What
Come
the hell?
on. You know that I enjoyed Napoleon last year. Okay, look, I have my misgivings about Ridley Scott, of course. He is questionable at best, but It's Paul Mescal, it's Denzel Washington, it's Pedro Pascal. I think it'll be fun. I'm up for a big blockbuster. I'll see it in IMAX. Why not? I'm getting some popcorn in. It's going to be great.
Until I saw the trailer, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking exactly that. But then I saw the trailer, and that actually would put me off. I just didn't realize it's just Gladiator 1. It's just that. They've just changed some of the casting. And
they did that with Terminator and Terminator 2, and it worked a treat.
I know.
So,
I know.
Come on.
I bloody knew that. So you're going to terminate me, yeah. But come on, Gladiator. I mean, because there was an original concept for Gladiator 2, which was going to be following Maximus in Hades, in hell. That sounds interesting.
That is interesting.
So I will leave you to go see it. And if you say it's good, I will go see it. But I suspect it'll just be...
Yeah, I don't have high hopes, really. But I'm still looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing Paul Mescal with a sort of RP accent, because it sounded from the trailer like he does. It's a bit shaky, and I always enjoy that. I enjoy a shaky accent. In a silly blockbuster, that's entertaining. Obviously, it's distracting in a film you actually care about being believable. But for this, I'm excited about it.
So when's that coming out?
In November. I'm not sure the exact date, but yeah.
I feel almost Gladiator 2 might just become the moment that the audience said enough now. You've got to stop just making sequels and prequels and reboots.
No way. The horse has bolted. It's too late, James. We're never going back. I'm sorry. We always end on this note. I feel like every episode we're like talking about the doom and gloom of the industry. God, sorry. It's depressing. My God.
Yeah, everyone, stop talking about the doom and gloom of the industry. Go and see all these sequels we're recommending. And on that note,
guys, thank you so much for listening to another season of Groovy Movies.
Bloody hell, season 4, absolutely. So if you could just leave us a like or leave us a review just to help get the podcast out to a bigger audience.
We'll be back in a few months' time. We'll trailer it so you'll know when we're back. But until then, have a lovely autumn. Enjoy those films. Let us know what you think about Gladiator 2, and we'll be back before you know it.
Bye.
Bye. Follow us on Instagram at Groovy Movies Pod or email us groovymoviespod@gmail.com.
Groovy Movies was produced and edited by Lily Austin.
Music and sound by James Brailsford.
Our logo was designed by Abby Jo Sheldon.
For references and more information about the films discussed, check out the show notes.